So thank you everybody so much for joining us for the Model Diplomacy webinar. This is our first webinar. So we are trying this out as a new thing. We hope it's useful and enjoyable and really helpful for all of you. My name is Charlie Hopkins. I'm the Director of Teaching and Learning here at the Council on Foreign Relations. I've been at the Council for about 1.5 years, and before that I was a classroom teacher for 9 years. And I was a big fan of using simulations, all kinds of different activities like model diplomacy in the classroom. I think they are really, really valuable learning opportunities, and I'm so excited to be able to work on model diplomacy here at the Council and share it with all of you. I also work on our other education product, World 101, and you can check that. You'll check that out as well. We'll have some links and things at the end. We'd love to get to know all of you really quickly. You will see in the Zoom toolbar there is a chat function. And if you change your chat to all panelists and attendees, you'll see that my colleague Rania, who's sitting off to the side here, along with Ian, we are both part of our great model diplomacy team. You'll see a message there from her already. And we'd love it if you would very quickly pop into that chat. What city or country are you joining us from today? Whether you've ever used model diplomacy before, and where do you use model diplomacy? Are you a classroom teacher? Are you a high school, college, or university teacher? Do you use this for some sort of adult training program? Are you a student organization? I'm just curious to see who else is here, and would love to be able to say hi to each other and welcome you to join us. So if you'll just pop that information into the chat window so we can say hi. All right, Ricardo from Argentina, welcome. We're so excited. Model diplomacy is used in over 120 countries now, and excited to see that Argentina is soon going to be one of them. And hi to Laura from Newton, Massachusetts, not far from where I grew up. Cool. We've got folks from a couple different places, high school, university. Richard from Ohio, welcome. Vancouver, Aaron from Vancouver. Brian from St. Charles, Missouri, great. We have a couple of experienced MD users as well as some new ones. And our plan really is for this to be helpful for both those groups of people. If you're brand new or if you are familiar and want to learn a little bit more about the new website that we started. Jason Conklin from Vero Beach, Florida, welcome. Shamita from Atlanta, I apologize if I didn't pronounce that correctly. Jennifer from Columbus, great, welcome, welcome. All right. See if I missed anybody else. Oh, Adam from Switzerland. Awesome. Well, Switzerland right now. Well, enjoy that sabbatical. Okay. I'm sure a few more people are gonna add that on, and I hope that you will as we continue. Rolf from Rome, Patrick from Berlin. Wow, we have a really international group today. That's great. Another person, Agostina from Argentina. Okay. So, as I said, we're really excited. We have people who use model diplomacy in all 50 states and over 120 countries. And it's really exciting to see that diversity of users reflected in our folks who are joining us today. So I want to give you a quick idea of our plan for today. We want to spend just a little bit of time talking about what is model diplomacy. If you are brand new to model diplomacy, we hope this will get you on the same page. If you are an experienced model diplomacy user, it's a great refresher of sort of what we think are the key features of the program. We'll take you through some of the new features, some of the new case content, and then the new sort of functionality that we've introduced with the website update last summer. We will do, we'll walk you through live setting up your first simulation. We'll look at some of the decisions you can make that really affect what makes for a successful simulation. And then we'll leave plenty of time for Q&A. And speaking of Q&A, you'll see in your toolbar, separate from the chat, there's a Q&A feature. And if you have questions either right now, you already have a question in mind, if questions come up while I'm speaking, or when we get to that Q&A section at the end, please feel free to toss those questions into Q&A. And Ian and Rania will make sure that I see them and we'll answer them when we get to that Q&A section. So drop those questions in Q&A as you have them or when we get to the end, and we'll go from there. All right. So we really think that model diplomacy is one of the premier foreign policy simulation programs that's available today. And there's a couple of things that we think are really special about it. It's free. It is totally free. People always get very excited about that. And it is simulation of both the National Security Council and, with the new updates, much stronger simulation of the UN Security Council as well. We offer both historical and hypothetical scenarios. And our 17 case studies are written in collaboration with our fellows here at the Council on Foreign Relations. New with the website update, we offer both basic and advanced versions of cases. Folks who are experienced MD users, all those cases you know and love are still around. We just call them advanced now. And then the basic cases are designed for folks who have a little bit less time, a little bit less preparation in international relations, and just want something that's a little bit more bite-sized. And so as a result of that, we think this is a product that's really accessible both for high school students and students who are in college, university, graduate school, and beyond. We've got a robust community of folks who use this at the undergraduate and graduate level, and a growing group of folks who are using this at the high school level. Couple of things there we go. We also really kept in mind, important trends in pedagogy and education as we've thought about designing model diplomacy, and ticked a lot of boxes here. This is a perfect example of a project-based activity. Students work through from beginning to end. They do research. They practice a bunch of different skills to reach a final product that's really authentic. Pardon me. We also use what would have often been termed 21st century skills. Of course, we know these skills have always been important, but they've gained a lot of interest recently as folks talk about 21st century education and the 4 C's of critical thinking: communication, collaboration, and creativity. It's also a chance to work on civic knowledge and skills. There's been a really welcome resurgence in civics education and discussion about civics education at the high school level, but also just nationally. And model diplomacy can be a great way to help students with that. It's a great example of active learning. This is a far cry from a lecture. Students are very involved at all steps of the process, thinking on their own, speaking, writing, discussing, listening to each other. And in the end, model diplomacy is an authentic assessment. It looks and feels a lot like some of the work that students will do as adults. They write memos, they give speeches, they present ideas to their boss, the President of the United States. Not all that different from what a lot of folks do all day in whatever career that they choose. So a couple of things we really highlight that make model diplomacy different from some of the other simulations that are out there in the world. It's a hybrid learning experience. Students prepare for the model diplomacy simulation. They watch some videos, they do some reading. All that happens online. So it's in the comfort of their home, the comfort of their cell phone while they're on the bus, whatever is convenient for their lives. But then we feel it's really important that the role play itself, the discussion, the presenting of ideas to the president or to the Security Council happens face-to-face, because that's how real diplomacy works. There's a reason why we have embassies around the world. There's a reason why the Secretary of State spends much of his or her time flying around the world to meet people in person. It's how real diplomacy gets done. And so we think it's really important that that's how students simulate doing diplomacy as well. We also work very closely with the fellows here at CFR, folks who are experts in their fields, the regions and the topics that they study. And all 17 of our case studies are written in close collaboration with those CFR fellows and backed by their research. We also keep our cases very up to date. We know that it's very important in a fast-changing world for case studies to reflect what is actually going on in the world. All of our cases get touched at least once a year to see if there are updates or changes to the situation that need to be reflected. And if events intervene, we'll go in more often and make edits and updates so that when students are using model diplomacy, nothing feels dated. Everything is reflective of what has happened in real life. And we really feel strongly that it's important for students to focus on collaboration and understanding the process of foreign policy decision making. Often we get asked about Model UN, and I love Model UN. I participated in Model UN as a student and as a teacher, but I know that sometimes Model UN can be more about public speaking. It can be competitive. And so one of the big things that we're focused on with model diplomacy is that it's not a competitive activity. It's an activity to really understand how decisions get made collaboratively and understand that either interagency process that happens in the NSC or that understands how decision-making happens in the UN Security Council across a number of different countries. We also are really proud of how flexible model diplomacy is. As you are choosing your case, you've got a couple of different options that you can think through. All these pictures are the cover photos of some of our case studies. So you already get a sense of the diversity of options of locations and topics. But as you're choosing, you can choose either basic or advanced cases. As I mentioned before, those basic cases are a little bit briefer. They often go a little less deep into kind of theoretical concepts of some of the cases. And so they're great depending on your needs. If your students are a little bit younger, or if they just have a little bit less time on their hands, or if they don't have any background in international relations yet, basic can be a good option. If you're really looking for a really meaty experience, either you're ready to go in there with your students and help them through, or if your students have a lot of background in these topics, those advanced cases might make more sense. You also have that choice between the United Nations Security Council or the NSC. All of our cases are available as NSC cases. That was what model diplomacy started out as. And we have, with the website update over the summer, started adding fully formed Security Council cases. Some of you who are familiar with the program may remember we used to have sort of a little add-on, build your own UN Security Council simulation. These are fully realized UN Security Council cases. We have 4 available now, and 4 or 5 more should be ready by the end of the school year. I should mention almost all cases come in basic and advanced. There's just 1 or 2 exceptions to that. Our 17 case studies are divided between hypothetical and historical. 15 of them are hypothetical, and those are the kinds of cases that, those are issues you wouldn't be surprised to see on the front page of the newspaper tomorrow morning. They are certainly very possible. They often relate to ongoing issues, but they're things that haven't specifically happened yet that students are working on solving. Our 2 historical cases are set in the past. One asks students to replay the Korean War in the 1950s, and then the other asks students to go through the decision-making around ultimately deciding to admit the Baltic nations to NATO, which were the first Soviet republics to join NATO in the 1990s. And finally, you have the choice of cases. Those 17 case studies cover every continent and a wide variety of topics. Some are very traditional, sort of security-based things where students may be deciding whether, maybe deciding between diplomacy or some sort of a military action. Others look at humanitarian issues or health-related, development-related topics. And then we even have some that are related to economic topics. We have one about climate change. So really a wide variety of topics that you can choose to simulate and have your students really dig into. So I mentioned that a simulation is sort of divided into 2 parts. That first part happens online, and then that second part happens in real life around a table. So we think of simulations as happening in 4 sections. Those first 2 sections are that preparation that happens online. Section 1 is what we call the council guide, whether it's the NSC or the UN Security Council. It walks students through how does that body work? What do people do? What are the different players in that? And so we have written material about that. There's a short video that features folks who actually have served on the NSC, additional readings if they're interested, and then an optional reading quiz. And then the same goes if you were running a UN Security Council simulation, the reading, the video, additional readings, and that optional quiz. Section 2, which also is going to happen on students' own time online, is the case study. And so there we have the case notes, which is a comprehensive write-up of the context of the situation they're looking at, the history, the role the U.S. has played, the situation that students will be facing as they simulate foreign policy decision-making. Again, there's a video that features experts, folks who have been involved in this region and these topics. And then everything revolves around what we call a decision point. And this is a really specific question or issue that students have to respond to in their role play. It's the problem, it's the emergency, it's the question that they are either providing advice to the president on how to handle, or if it's the UN, that they together have to try to craft a resolution that addresses that decision point. Like section 1, there are also additional readings if students want to check them out or if you want to assign them, and then that optional quiz. Both those quizzes, students take them on our website, and you can view the responses and give feedback on our website too. We'll look at that in a little bit more detail in a few minutes. Once students are fully prepared, they understand how the council works, they've read the case study, they understand the decision point, they're fully prepared, we move into sections 3 and 4 that happen in person. Section 3 is what we call the role play. And here we have some real details that are useful for kind of understanding what's going to happen around that table. Students can be assigned roles such as National Security Advisor, Secretary of State, or if it's a UN case, they're China and the Netherlands and different countries. So there's some details about those roles. You know, what does the Secretary of Defense do, and how is that different from the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff? Useful information for students. We can walk them through some research, and they write a position memo, and then they participate in that role play around the table. And again, there's some flexibility here. We provide some detailed tips for how to run that discussion in a series of rounds, and instructors can either choose to play the role of the president and run the discussion themselves, or if your students are up for it, a lot of instructors also just sit back. They assign one of their students to be the president, and let the students run the conversation independently. Once that role play is done, once a decision has been made or a recommendation issued, we also know that learning happens best when students have a chance to reflect on what they've learned. And so section 4 is a brief wrap-up that walks students through discussion while they're still sitting around the table about what just happened. They drop their assigned personas that they're simulating, and just talk about what they learned, how the discussion went. And then we also have a detail assignment for what we call a policy review memo that invites students to reflect on what they've done, what they've learned. Did the decision go the way they thought? Did it meet the goals of their assigned character, and so on. And so that's available there too. So we're going to switch over now and take a look at what does the Model Diplomacy website actually look like. What are the key questions that you need to think through when you're setting up your simulation? And how does that all work on the new site? So I'm just going to switch tabs here. And so here is the home page. I'm already logged in. If you weren't logged in, you'd go up to the corner here, and instead of seeing my account, you'd see login. You would want to create an instructor account, fill out that information, and that's all pretty self-explanatory. Once you're logged in, you can see the website. We've got an introductory video. We've got a quick start guide if you need to download this and show it to an administrator or somebody who's interested in knowing what is this thing you're checking out. We highlight some recent case studies. These are ones that we've updated recently. A little more material about how it works, folks who love us. But if you're ready to start your simulation, you're going to want to go to the case library, which is right here at the top. Click through, and you'll see the selection of cases. You'll remember that I said we have 17 simulations, but, 17 case studies, but in fact, many of those come in more than one version, a basic and advanced, an NSC and a UN. And so if you know what you're looking for, your best bet is to use this filter up here. Let's say I want to do NSC. And then if you, for your particular class, already know, gosh, I really want to do, I'm going to do something in East Asia, because that's what my class is about, for example. And then I can filter down and see, all right, here are my NSC cases about East Asia. We have quite a few. Perhaps I'm interested, and you'll see they're noted here. The cyber clash, East China Sea, and North Korean nuclear threat are hypothetical, but then we also have this Korean War, which is marked historical. I'm going to go ahead and do the North Korean nuclear threat. because we just updated it today. And it's also a great simulation. So I clicked through on that and I come to the overview page. A nice picture, well, scary picture, but big picture there. Brief summary, and then a little bit longer paragraph that lays out for you briefly what that decision point is going to look at. Right, this is about we're going to have some information that we're worried that North Korea is improving its nuclear capabilities. If you're thinking about how this fits into your class, we lay out some concepts and some issues that this covers. And then if you didn't like that choice, you can take a look at some other ones. But I'm going to decide that I like this one. So if I'm ready to go, I'm going to go ahead and click this Create Simulation button. And I'm taken to the Simulation Manager page. See here again is that title and that quick summary to remind myself what I chose. Sometimes you forget on the way. And the first option is going to be to name your simulation. And this is mainly for if you've got more than one section of a class, if you run the same simulation in subsequent semesters, just so that you can keep track of which one is which. So in this case, I'm going to say webinar simulation fall 2019 semester. Why not? From there, we have those other details that you can choose, whether you want basic or advanced. I'm going to pick advanced. And then whether you want to include those optional reading quizzes. I think I do, so I'm going to click yes. And then I can choose, do I want it for the NSC guide? Yes. Do I want it for the case study? Yes, I think so. Once I've chosen all of those things, and if I've changed my mind, we can go back and change it later. But once I've decided on those things, I'm going to hit Save and Publish. And that's going to load. And now we are down to adding students. And that's going to happen by clicking this great big plus sign here. We've got a couple of options. The easiest thing, especially if you have a small class, just type in their email addresses here. Stick commas between them. You can put in a whole bunch, and we're good to go. Just in this example, I will add an example email address. I could also, if you've got a really large class and you've got an Excel spreadsheet of them, you can download a CSV file and paste into there. Also, if you are running more than one simulation in the same class, so it's the same group of students, and you want to not type their email addresses in again, you can do that. So for example, in this account, I've got a few other open classes. So let's say that I wanted to reuse, I don't know, this DC IPD one. I could do that, hit copy students, and that would add them. I don't think I'm going to do that though. I'm just going to add my sample student here, and there we are. So you'll see you start to pop up down here. You can see their email address. And what's just happened is that person, if that were a real email address, would have gotten an email inviting them to create an account. Once they do, their name will pop up there. And you can track that process here, whether students have checked their email, click the link. This status here will go from invitation sent to account created and so on. These two boxes let you know if they've taken the quiz or not. And then over here, we can assign a role. Everybody starts off as a general advisor to the president. And every case has that. So if you have a couple of extra students, or if you want to skip the whole detail of giving students an assigned role, you can just leave them as general advisors. But if I want to make this more detailed, I can change that. Right? Maybe the student's going to be the president. They're going to have to receive all the advice and make the decision. Or the National Security Advisor, Secretary of State, and so on. Say I want to assign that, assign the role, and there we go. Now the Secretary of State. If you need to change that, you can go back and change it again. If I need to delete somebody because they dropped the class or whatever, there's the delete key. And once you've done all that, you can start exploring your simulation, seeing what your students are going to see. So right here across the top is the guide to the simulation. That overview page will take us back to that first page with a summary of the issues, the concepts, and the giant picture of a missile coming out of the ocean. And then these are those 4 sections that I mentioned earlier. The NSC guide takes students through how the NSC works. And as promised, there's that overview, the description of the interagency process, a timeline, a glossary, and then that assessment is that quiz at the end. The case notes take students through the actual case, what is going on in North Korea that they have to deal with, again with that assessment at the end. The role play, this section really gives students instructions for how to succeed in that role play, how to write that memorandum, how to actually be a part of that, that role play around the table that happens at the end there. And then section 4 is the wrap up, the debrief, reflecting, and then that policy review memo. So I can jump in anywhere I want. Maybe I want to see, what's the recent history of North Korea. So I select that. Here's the situation. You can see it's letting me know that I'm in the fall 2019. There's that name that I gave it. A couple of pictures, and then some news clips, and you can read about the recent history of the nuclear crisis in North Korea. We have this really great glossary tool. So these orange words, if you click on them, you find out, gosh, what exactly is a sanction? There we are. Okay. Let's say I've decided, oh, I forgot to add a student. How do I get back to that simulation manager? The easiest way to do that is to go back up to my account up here in the corner. And you'll see it takes you right to a list of open simulations. Here's that webinar simulation, fall 2019. And I can click on it and make any changes that I need to make. Add students, or maybe I have decided, oh gosh, I really did want to do basic. Might lose a couple of details. I haven't made any annotations, so that's okay. Save simulation. Now my students are in the basic version. Okay. Just to show you very quickly a couple other cool features. Here's a simulation that's got a number of students in it, so you can see you get students' names. And once they've added a name, you can click that button there and get these printouts, so that if you want to have name cards for your discussion, you can click those, print them out, hit print placards, or if you're going to do them all at once, this button up here at the top will print all the placards for the entire class. Just a fun little thing to add. We also have messaging on the site. So if you want to send a message either to an individual student or to the whole class, you can do that as well. Okay. A couple of other things that I want to highlight. Once you're logged in as an instructor, we've looked at that case library and how you can use that to to open a case. The About page does more or less what you expect, and the Testimonials page has some stories from folks who liked model diplomacy, and it has a few tips for how people have made it work in their class. If you're looking for some ideas for how to implement this, that might be a good place to look. But the best place, the place I really want to draw your attention to, is right here, the resources. For instructors, we have a number of instructor resources. That quick start guide goes over a lot of the details that I've just spoken about, gives a nice overview of what's going on. But this instructor guide here gives you much more detail, a lot more detail about some of the pedagogical approaches that we've used to set this up, more details about how to make this really flexible, all the different ways that you can customize model diplomacy, some tips when you're trying to decide how to assign roles, who should be president, what's a good type of student to make the Secretary of State. We have some suggestions for you there. The guide to a simulation just walks you through what is this really going to look like in my classroom? What are all the steps that are going to happen? Because sometimes it's just helpful to have that overview of what's about to happen in my class. That will walk you through it. Grading and rubrics, take them, leave them. If you don't feel like making your own, we have some suggestions. Obviously also though, a lot of instructors have got a grading scheme in mind, and that'll work too. Memos are not that different from essays. And I especially want to point out this tips for running a successful role play. This is available to students as well, because if you assign students to be the president or the national security advisor, they're going to need to know that as well. And that has a lot of suggestions about how to run a really successful conversation around the table and to have a fairly realistic simulation of how foreign policy decisions get made in real life. So do check out that instructor guide if you have questions, if you're unsure about anything. Lots of great suggestions there. I'm going to pop back over now to our slideshow. and take us to the Q&A section. I see we've had a couple of questions come in already, but if you've got more questions, please add them to that Q&A section, and I will get them here. So we've got a couple already. First one, what is the recommended class size for model diplomacy? It's a great question, and we do have some flexibility here. Most cases have 12 to 15 roles that are part of them. If you're doing a UN Security Council simulation, obviously there's 15 seats on the UN Security Council, and you can potentially have a 16th person who acts as the presider who doesn't get a vote. For the NSC, depending on the case, depending on the topic, different people are pulled in from the cabinet or different advisors. That being said, most classes aren't going to be 12 to 15 people. And so there you've got a couple of options. If you're just slightly over that 12 to 15 mark, sometimes the easiest thing to do is to just assign 1 or 2 students to be a general advisor. Or if it's the UN Security Council, just change the rules and add another couple countries. If you have significantly more than 15, you've got a couple of options. If you've got some time on your hands and some space, split the class in half and do 2 simulations side by side. Especially the students can run their own discussion. I know college professors who've got really big classes, and they'll take their lecture hall, they'll put 4 groups of students in the 4 corners of the room, they each run their discussion, and the professor kind of dips in and out of each conversation, and the assessment just happens, and the students writing at the end. Your other option, if you want everybody around the table all at once, is have students work in teams. Have a 2-headed Secretary of Defense, and have 2 students collaborate to represent that one role. They can research together, they can write together, and then with a little bit of guidance or a little bit of maturity, they can make sure they share that speaking role pretty equally. So that's another approach if you've got a large class. So it's a couple of different options. And we've had simulations up to as many as 50 students or so that we know of if you're starting to put folks into pairs or groups of 3 even. So there's some flexibility there. We had a question, how long would you recommend spending on one of these? Yeah, I think, again, there's some flexibility here. I know plenty of people who will get through the in-class portion of it. So obviously that reading that happens ahead of time, you know best how quickly your students can read. Grad students are going to knock this out in a day or 2. High school students are going to need a little bit longer. In terms of actual in-class time, people have done this in as short as 2 hours maybe, which depending on how your classes are organized, maybe that's 1 class meeting, maybe that's 2 or 3 class meetings for you. Getting through the roles, maybe even 90 minutes or so. If you're feeling short on time, definitely the basic cases are something to look at, and you can kind of tweak the different rounds of discussion as you need to in order to get through them a little faster. Maybe you circulate the position memos ahead of time so that they don't have to give initial positions in the discussion. There's ways to kind of hack that. I also know of instructors who will spend a couple weeks and they'll kind of keep this going in the background, perhaps while other things are going on in class. They'll revisit the discussion over several class meetings. They might pause in the middle to send students off to do a little bit more research. So it can become sort of a larger project that acts as kind of an anchor or a major assessment for a course, or it could be an activity that you do in just a couple of days. So again, there's a lot of flexibility there. Absolutely. As a previous user, how do I register again? If you are an instructor, hopefully your account should have carried over, but you do need to reset your password. So if you are trying to do that, if you know which email address you used, use that again, just hit the I forgot my password button, set up a new email address, and your contact info will be there. Part of this new, better website, though, is that we weren't able to migrate over the old simulations, but your personal contact info will be there, and you can start fresh simulations from here. If that's not working for you, then absolutely just use a different email address, or send us an email, and we will see if we can sort that out on our end for sure. Which cases have been especially popular? That's a great question. We actually get a lot of variety because folks are choosing cases that they know their students are interested in or that relate to their classes. If there's a class with a particular regional focus or something, those are the ones that they pick. So we have a surprisingly sort of diverse choice of cases. We don't have a couple of specific favorites. I think ones that have gotten a lot of attention recently, North Korea for sure, the one that I picked. It's not just me who likes it. A lot of people like it. It's been in the news a lot. The Venezuela case, the unrest in Venezuela, I think also probably related to the news. So these things tend to be cyclical a little bit. Boko Haram gets a fair amount of attention. I think part of it is it's sort of one of our terrorism-related cases, and one of two Africa cases that I mentioned. We've got a whole bunch in Asia, just the two in Africa, and so I think with a lot of interest in Africa, and just a couple of choices. I'll mention also we're always adding new cases. You all are among the first to know that we are currently working on a case looking at the national security implications of immigration and looking at some of the conditions in Central America that are driving immigration to the United States. That case should be up later this academic year. And then from there, we'll see. If you've got a topic you're burning to have us take a look at, we're always happy to hear from you by email or Twitter or any of that. All right, I'm getting a couple other things popping up. What is the difference between American diplomacy and other countries? Yeah, I think these things vary a little bit. We have organized this around, the NSC cases are organized around how the U.S. decision-making process works. And I think some countries have similarities in sort of having an interagency process. But even if, certainly other democratic countries, I should say, if you're in North Korea, I'm pretty sure the decision-making process works very differently. But sort of countries that have a similar sort of democratic process of decision-making are going to look similar. But even if there are those differences, even if people have different titles or there's not a National Security Council, a lot of the skills that model diplomacy builds of research, of understanding others' points of view, of writing memos, of listening to each other and working together to look at options for policy, those are going to be very transferable. I mentioned at the top we have model diplomacy is used in over 120 countries. We also see foreign military academies, foreign embassies, some foreign government officials use model diplomacy as a training tool, which I think is really cool, and speaks to even if you are not living in the U.S. or maybe you're not specifically studying U.S. foreign policy decision-making, a lot of the skills that are involved in running this and in being part of that simulation are very, very transferable to diplomacy in any context. Lots of questions. This is so great. Just reading. Yeah. You can always add more students. If you added a bunch of students and then a couple students join the class later, something, you can always go back and add more through any of those three processes that we looked at. So this is not the setup, although I did it all in one go. It's not a one and done. It's not a one-shot deal. You can make edits. You can add students as you need to, because we know stuff changes, especially beginning of the semester. Students add and drop. It happens, and we figure it out. And so we want to be reflective of that reality. And if you're running into issues with getting student accounts activated or whatever, again, please email us and let us know. How frequently do we answer feedback emails? We try to get to stuff, we try to check every day that we're in the office. Not so much on the weekends, but definitely we've got a team of folks, 3 or 4 of us, who take a look at the emails. And so there's always somebody in the office who can get back to you. So we try to be as prompt as we can, because we know that if you've got a question, you probably got class the next day, and we want to be as supportive as we can of that. Yeah, so again, questions. Let me just go ahead and jump to our last slide because I keep mentioning our email address, which is right there at the bottom. modeldiplomacy@cfr.org is the best way to send stuff to us and ask us questions. As I said, there's 3 or 4 of us who have access to that email address, so we have an internal system to make sure there's always somebody keeping an eye on it, and so that's the best way. If you've met one of us individually, and you send that to us, we might be on vacation, but if you send it to that main email address, someone will get back to you and we'll sort out your issue. We also have a recently revived Twitter page. Not the greatest way to ask us support questions, but if you want to share stories, if your students are open to you sharing pictures, we've had professors who will live tweet a simulation before. We always love to be tagged or mentioned, and we absolutely will try and retweet and interact with you there. Or if you just want to connect other folks to model diplomacy, Twitter is a great way to do that. Other questions? How does MD overlap with World 101? Great question. I mentioned World 101 at the top. That is CFR Education Initiative's other big product that we've just started to roll out. And you'll see that also is on Twitter and Facebook. I'm not going to talk about it too much. World 101 is our free library of online explainers about global issues and international relations. And I think there is some overlap there. We think of them fully as separate products, but depending on the case, there's certainly going to be content on World 101 that might be useful for students who want to do a little bit more research, or if you want to get your students excited at the beginning. And likewise, if students come across something in World 101 that looks interesting, it truly is introductory explainer material. And if students want something deeper, model diplomacy is definitely a way to give them a much richer experience than they can get in a 5-minute video or in a short explainer with an infographic kind of thing. So, sort of very different applications, different approaches to helping students and learners of all ages to understand the world. But they certainly can complement each other depending on your goals and the amount of time that you have. So great question. When will this immigration scenario be live? Our boss really wants to know that too. No, I'm kidding. Probably mid-spring. We're still in the process of drafting it. Probably mid-spring. So if you're looking for something sort of to finish the year with a bang, probably a good option. But if you want to start the spring semester, maybe don't count on it quite yet. And we'll have updates as we get closer, and we'll definitely announce it when it comes out. On Twitter, we have a mailing list. So when you sign up for Model Diplomacy, if you check the appropriate box, you'll get some emails from us about once a month. Let you know about things like this event, things like new cases or case updates that have come along. And so if you keep an eye on that, you better believe we'll send out an email when we have that case available. I'm assuming that question came from someone who's excited about it, so I'm really glad to hear that. All right. How flexible are the case studies? To what extent can we make changes and adjustments? Sure. I mean, you can do whatever you want. Absolutely. I mentioned a couple of the guidelines of how you can customize this. Some things you can do with one click. You want to go basic or advanced. That's a big customization right there. And you can go into some more minute detail. There's a feature I didn't show off too closely that allows you can leave notes for students on certain pages. So if you want to say, oh, don't worry about this part so much, or, please watch this related video so that we can talk about it, or something like that, you absolutely can. One other thing that I meant to show you before that I will show you really quickly now is that if I go back to my account and I open up this test webinar, test simulation that I just created, I can, let's say I want to take a look at the background of the case. You'll see on every page there is this download button. And so you can, if for some reason you want students to be able to read this on paper, if you want to be able to post this as a PDF to your LMS or your course website, you can download and then either print or save as a PDF. And if you go to the overview page, there's this lovely print all button. So similarly, if you want to print out the entire case, and so that's an option too. If you really want to make some edits, you're more than welcome. I also know professors who, if their students, if they just have a really short amount of time, or their students are very kind of happy to have a little less structure, we'll just pass out one page and sort of say, let's not have a formal simulation, but let's have a discussion about how you might approach this based on something we've been learning. So there's meant to be a lot of flexibility here. If you've got something specific in mind that you're trying to accomplish, again, feel free to send us an email. We can talk you through that, offer some suggestions that are more specific to what you are working on. So I think, and we've also had we had one professor who is a retired Foreign Service officer and invented a whole fifth round of discussion that she made the students after they reached a policy decision. They then had to go and do a simulated congressional hearing to get funding for the plan that they'd picked. So we have some really creative instructors doing really interesting things. And that's really great, and that really makes us happy that people are using this in any and every way possible in ways that are helpful to them. So it looks like, unless anybody else has got a late breaking question, that we've gotten through pretty much the whole queue of questions. So let me just switch back to this page so I can leave you with our contact information. We do hope that you'll follow us at model_diplomacy on Twitter. Mention us, retweet us, talk to us, reply to us, let us know how you're using model diplomacy. Please do feel free to email us if you've got questions or things aren't quite working the way you expect, or you're trying to figure out how best to make it work in your classroom. We've worked with thousands of instructors in lots of different situations and are happy to share what we've learned and what they've learned over time. And if you're curious about World 101, our library of online explainers about global issues and international relations, you can search for that online or on Twitter and Facebook, or there's a itty-bitty link at the bottom of the Model Diplomacy website too that'll take you there. So we really appreciate all of you joining us today. As a quick reminder, we have been recording this, and so we will be sharing that recording probably sometime tomorrow once we wrap up here. And please do reach out and let us know if you have further questions. We're so excited that you are so excited about model diplomacy, and we really appreciate your joining us. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye, and we'll hope to hear more from you soon.